Welcome, everyone. So happy that you were able to join us today. I want to thank you for being with us today. We're very excited to host this webinar on how environmental, social, and governance, also referred to as corporate social responsibility, can help you drive government affairs wins. We will have a Q&A section at the end of the session, so please submit your questions through the chat that you see on your Zoom session, and we will address those at the end of the presentation. But before I go any further, um, I want to point out that with our recent acquisition of GovPredict and KnowWho, Phone to Action is now the premier solution for all your government affairs needs. Our category defining solution can help you monitor everything that affects your organization, find the right tools to influence policy, and make it happen. We're now a single vendor providing solutions to help our customers stay on top of legislative and regulatory developments at all levels of government and engage stakeholders and advocates who can help them drive their desired legislative and regulatory outcomes. So, what brings us together today? So let's set some context to that. Traditionally, ESG have been viewed as a separate entity or a separate subtopic from the policy work of government affairs. But incorporating your environmental and social agenda into your government affairs can lead to better meetings with policymakers, clearer ROI, and increased brand awareness, among many other benefits. We're seeing today that corporate social responsibility has become sort of a market expectation. Consumers are judging brands not just by their products and services that they provide, but also by the social impact that corporations are having in the world. So how can your department integrate ESGs into the work that they do and deliver better outcomes? We are very, very honored to have Susan Moore with us today. Susan currently serves as the Corporate Vice President of Corporate Responsibility and International Government Affairs at AMD. She advances AMD's contribution as a value partner in the innovations, investments, and societal benefits of high-performance computing. Susan is also a board member and former chairwoman of the Information Technology Industry Council and a board member of the Responsibility Business Alliance. She has received the Gary P. Fazzino Award for Innovation Excellence for her leadership and contribution, and is a 2019 Women Worth Watching in Profiles in Diversity Journal. In partnership with AMD engineers, she has helped launch and leads the award-winning AMD 25 by 20 Energy Efficient Initiative, which was named to the 2020 Fortune Change the World list. Susan, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience with us today. We are sure that we're going to learn a lot by listening to your insight.
Hey, thank you so much, Diego. There's lots of conversations occurring now around environmental social governance, or ESG, and also lots of research that indicates that an organization that sets the right business proposition for ESG can really return value to the organization. Today I recognize that we have a wide variety of attendees with different experiences and perspectives, different business models, risks, opportunities for their organization. And ESG is very personal to each organization. So I hope to leave you by the end of our conversation today with some ideas and some action items on how you can really contribute to your organization's focus, priorities, investments, and goals around ESG. Diego, you want to go ahead and flip to the first one? And as we look at ESG and corporate social responsibility, let me give you a little bit of background about it. And that is, for many years, at least 20, 25 years plus, we've really spoken a lot about corporate social responsibility, sustainability, shared values, and now we all hear more of a conversation around ESG, and they're all related. It's just that ESG is a deeper focus around the data and the metrics and the transparency around the data and metrics associated with corporate responsibility, and really leaning in on 3 different areas. Let's go and kind of briefly talk about each of them. One is around environment. Environment is your organization's footprint, its impact in the environment around you, encompassing perhaps your organization's use of natural resources, its power consumption and its operations or its products. It can also encompass, pollution output, pollution avoidance, as well as certainly risk and opportunities and impacts in climate change. The S is really the focus on the company's relationship with people and society. Public policies in this arena touch upon diversity and inclusion, human rights, health and safety of workers in the supply chain, and also looking at it not only with customers and consumers locally, but also worldwide. It also encompasses a focus and policies around community engagement and philanthropy as well. And when we look at these topics, it's important to not only look at them and all of these topics, not only for your own organization, but also your supply chain that helps bring products and services to the market. And then governance. Governance really focuses on how is the organization run? What is its legal compliance? What's its transparency and reporting? Its ethics, its shareholder rights, its board of directors and composition of board of directors and more. Right now, there's a lot of conversation occurring in ESG around the framework or frameworks for reporting the data. There's different frameworks. There's, the GRI framework, there's CDP, there's SASB, lots of acronyms there. SASB, there's also the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. But for government affairs professionals, we don't need to be really so much worried about that. The point is that look and understand what data your company or your organization is measuring and its metrics. Diego asked me today to share tips with you throughout the day. So the first one up on the screen is basic, but very important, which is go back into your organization if you don't already know, but learn who leads your CSR and your sustainability team and its programs. Depending upon, there's not any right or wrong place necessarily for CSR or your sustainability team to be located. A lot of it may be driven by your business model, your size of your company, or even maybe just legacy. But the tip is definitely go look and see who leads your company's focus on ESG and corporate responsibility, pulling together the company and being that kind of the axle of its focus. And we'll get more into that a little bit later. And then also understanding how do they engage with the other teams across your company. Second tip is to then go check out your own website. It's highly possible that your company issues some type of a corporate responsibility or a sustainability report. According to the Governance and Accountability Institute, more than 90% of Fortune 500 companies issue a sustainability report. And then lastly, go find out if your organization does a materiality assessment. If we can go back to that one, that'd be great. Thanks, Diego. Find out if your company does a materiality assessment. Many companies do. Essentially, it's a periodic assessment, getting input from internal stakeholders and external stakeholders to identify what are those issues and topics that are particularly material to the company in terms of its impact on society and society's impact on the company. The reason I mention this is that knowing what those material issues are helps you identify what are the public policies that you need to be focusing on. And then Diego, if you can go to the next slide. And then, when you think about that in the materiality assessment, ESG can help you identify what public policy issues and areas you should be focused on, maybe ones that you don't need to be focusing on so that you can go look at others. But essentially, it's a very helpful way about prioritizing your time and attention. We'll use industry supply chain just as an example. There's a lot of conversation worldwide right now around industry supply chains. How can industry supply chains address the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic around the world, the impact of supply chains on the environment and climate change, the role of protecting workers and industry supply chains, as well as the reliability and the resiliency of supply chains and economic security and national security. So my first tip for you when you look at this topic is really think about your organization's value chain, which is a bit broader than just supply chain. The value chain recognizes not only downstream customers, but also your upstream suppliers. The value chain will encompass, for example, what are some of the raw materials that you take and you use in your processes and your products? And, how do you then add value to them through production and manufacturing and other processes to create your end product or service that you sell to the finished, as a finished good to your consumers and customers. Whereas a supply chain, generally speaking, it's a little bit more narrow, focused on, what does it take to get a product or service to your customer. And if your company outsources manufacturing, then in the area of value chain, your sphere of focus and your sphere of influence should be even larger to definitely include those that manufacture your products. And public policy conversations these days are often encompassing really the value chain in addition to just that relationship between the customer and the supplier. And when I say that, I'm talking about public policies encompassing, for example, use of chemicals, minerals, use of water or electricity in the operations, the creation, the reuse, or the collection of product waste, certainly the creation of greenhouse gas emissions, and also policies around how workers are treated. My second tip in this area on how to use ESG to identify public policy priorities is to look inside your company or your organization and understand what codes of conduct or what standards your organization adheres to. I'll give you a couple of examples on this. For example, the Responsible Business Alliance, also called the RBA, and its initiatives around labor, minerals, and factories. They have more than 400 member companies that belong to the RBA, and the RBA issues an industry code of conduct that not only these 400 plus companies adhere to, but also 21 million plus employees in their supply chains operating in over 120 countries around the world. It's quite possible that your organization is a member of the RBA, and it's a code of conduct you would want to know about as it intersects with ESG. And even if your company or organization is not a member of the RBA code is pushed out to suppliers that supply product or services to the RBA members. And so its reach is even broader. Another example here are like ISO standards. ISO is an international standards organization, and their standards are wide-ranging and cover activities in manufacturing, managing processes, delivering services, or supplying materials. And it's quite possible that your company's adherence to ISO standards also intersects with public policies in the realm of ESG. And then the third tip here is not anything unique just to ESG, but it is, you really want to narrow down the field of issues. And you can do that by really knowing your business strategy. And, and you're going to learn that really by talking to the decision makers in your organization and looking and, they probably ideally are looking at their business strategy these days with an increasing lens of ESG. And so you would want to be at the table with them as they're setting that business strategy so that you best understand it, to know what are the public policy issues that you want to be focused on so that you can support the business. And really it's a focus on, where is their greatest and highest risk or reward, or particular maybe unique risk or reward compared to other issues. Okay, Diego, next slide. You can also use ESG to expand your organization's relevance to policymakers. Let's say, for example, that your organization makes a product that goes into a smart grid and that reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and there's a large employer in a particular district that uses your product. Some people may instinctively go and think about the footprint of a company's environmental presence without also considering its handprint. Footprints, and generally speaking here, footprints generally refer to and are thought in terms of burdens or negative impact on environment or society, whereas handprints are also impacts on environment or society, but we generally think of them in terms of something positive or beneficial, something that we empower others as well. And so my first tip in this area is, to understand your business's outcomes in terms of not only footprints, but also handprints. You might be able to learn this through talking with your sales teams, your business units, your corporate development teams. What ESG impacts do they know of? Again, good time here. If you've not yet recently read your corporate responsibility report, I would read it with this lens as well. It might well be covered in your corporate responsibility report. Tip 2 in this area is, by looking at your role and contributions, you can also cultivate subject matter experts that you could bring to meet with policymakers, not only to share information and exchange views. Oftentimes I find in these conversations, it's really the questions that are asked that are particularly helpful to me. And then tip number 3, and I probably should put this as first, it's more of a caution, but a very important one, which is to not overstate your company's or organization's impact in ESG. As innocent as it may be, maybe it's through pride or enthusiasm, it's extremely important not to overstate your company's impact in ESG. ESG is not puffery. In fact, in ESG, there is a level of transparency that at times can be a bit uncomfortable. So, back with handprints, oftentimes along with handprints or footprints, my advice to you is to acknowledge them, talk about them, but you can put them in context. Okay, Diego, next slide, please. You can also use ESG to demonstrate and show your government affairs value inside your company and to support business opportunities as well. We all know that they seem to fly by very quickly these days, but always, and particularly, it's easy for different departments just to be focused in on what their particular role is or their deadlines are within the overall company success, and kind of be very focused on that. And as a government affairs professional, sometimes you may not be in headquarters, and so it may be out of sight, out of mind. So Diego, tip number one I have for you here is that you can really use ESG by helping colleagues understand the policy issues, the trends, the forecasts that you are seeing here to help them with their work. As we all know, we rely heavily on cultivating authentic and deep-lasting, long-lasting relationships. That's a statement not only about external audiences, but also your internal colleagues as well. And so by bringing and helping your colleagues internally know and learn what some of the public policy issues are that you're seeing that relates to ESG affecting their role, you have an opportunity to be in regular contact with them on a right basis. You have a reason to call them to call you. And even if decisions aren't made in a particular conversation, you're more apt to be, kept in mind. And it's another easy way to break down silos that can accidentally or unintentionally occur within organizations. Tip number two is, helping your colleagues understand, your opportunities to help others learn about their initiatives in the space of ESG, if that's something that they want. You can also use ESG to, also enter another doorway with your customers and suppliers. I think sometimes business teams and sales teams forget that as a government affairs professional, we too have doorways into important customers and suppliers. And so it is just another way that we can coordinate and support our organizations and our customers in the space of ESG. But, big point of advice here, maybe probably from more of mistakes throughout my years, is to, when you're doing this, super important to really agree early on what is the definition of success, particularly when you're coming from two different lenses and areas of expertise. Definitions of success may be quite different, and so big piece of advice is to agree early on is what is the definition of success in working with another team. What are the outcomes, what are the measurements, what's the time frame, what are the cues that if you see, you're heading off in the direction of success or not, and it's time to readjust. Tip number three, and that is, increasingly ESG is and a key part of sales and public procurement. And through your focus on ESG policy issues that you've already identified are important with your company, working with your sales teams and your business units and others, you can be passing along to them insights on where trends in public policy are going so that they can plan toward it. And knowing their interests, what are their pain points, can help you narrow where do you need to be and where do you not need to be. Some of the ESG topics that I've been seeing in public procurement conversations and customer conversations are pretty wide encompassing, ranging from energy consumption of products, chemicals use in the design and or production of goods, working hours and conditions, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, disclosure of hazardous substances, sourcing of renewable energy, diversity programs, and the list goes on. So in closing, as a government affairs professional, you have a very important role to an opportunity to help your company really achieve its ESG business proposition. And I hope that you'll leave our conversation today and think about how you can really advance your company's success. I think it's extremely important in today's world. Thanks, Diego. Diego, I think you may be on mute.
It wouldn't be a Zoom meeting if somebody wasn't on mute and talking while muted, right? Um, I was thanking you, thank you for taking the time. This has been, the insights you've been providing, are extremely helpful. I think many can take lessons in how to navigate these topics internally with some expectations that the market sort of assumes that this is a standard or it's becoming a standard for organizations to be public about certain issues and taking a stand, right? So while we wait for some of those questions to come in, we already have a couple. So I just want to remind you that all of our encompassing products cover local, state, and federal government and gives you bills, regulation news from 80,000 different media outlets and the Twitter streams of government officials. We have more data from more sources than anyone else. We know that a lot of providers spam your inbox every morning with irrelevant alerts. That's a waste of your time. Our laser focus alert tell you the moment anything happens that you need to know about. In addition to other intel, we have an exclusive database of every donation made to every political campaign. Use this to find your allies, build coalitions, and raise more money for your own PAC. So let's take a look at some of these questions. Let's see how we're doing here. We have one, two, three. We have a couple. Let's see if we can get through all of them. So first question. You mentioned sort of materiality assessment. Can you go a little deeper on that, on how to navigate that and sort of how to do this assessment in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. As I was mentioning, periodically companies will take a step back and do a very methodical assessment of what are across the myriad of topics I raised earlier, and plus even more, what are the topics that are particularly material about for their organization, looking at their impact on society and society's impact on them. It's a very, from my experience, a very formal, methodical approach of soliciting input from investors, employees, analysts, customers, other thought leaders in this space. And then, and certainly, if I didn't say it, employees as well, very important. And then taking that input, then there's a lot of identification of issues and prioritization of where are those areas where the company should lean in even more, either because of high risk, high reward, major significance. Every company or organization is going to do that a little bit differently, but that whole process really informs then the company's strategy around corporate responsibility and ESG. And the reason I mention that is that you as a government affairs professional would want to understand what are the issues that rose to that top level where the company is going to lean in more on with maybe perhaps investments or other processes. But also there may be a second tier of issues that didn't rise to the top level, but could be on the horizon for your organization. You would want to know about them. And then there may be a tier of what I've seen as quadrants, and there may be another quadrant that these issues are very important, perhaps for other companies based off of business models or presence around the world or whatever, that maybe you as a government affairs professional don't necessarily need to be focusing on important issues, but maybe not the right ones for your company. Bottom line is learning more about that process and those issues will help guide you. You can certainly also ask to be a part of the next time the materiality assessment is done. I find them to be very informative. And it doesn't mean that other issues are off the table that your company needs to be focused on. It's just generally these are the ones that are particularly material that your organization is going to lean into a little bit more.
Great. And I think a question from Anne came in that I think sort of gives us good second part to this discussion. She writes, she works with clients in the financial service area, and the use and value of ESG may have some different kinds of applications in that particular industry. So she asks if you have any suggestions or any good resources for pursuing this type of activity, maybe industry specific, or maybe things that that may be more relevant. Speaking of this sort of assessment, right?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not active in the financial industry, but there are definitely a variety of organizations out there that do advise companies on doing the materiality assessments. A whole slew. Reaching out to Sustainability 50 is an organization where your company may be a member of it. It's a very valuable networking group of sustainability leaders. They can provide you some resources. Actually, peers and customers have also been can also be very informative to you as well. There's BSR, there's series, there's a lot of resources out there that can help you do the materiality assessment, and then also kind of figure out which is the ones that are most relevant for your organization. The aspect that I would focus on here is what makes sense for the 8 other companies around you may not be what your company needs to be focused on. I started off our conversation today by saying that ESG is very personal to each organization. And then that's very, very true. So really, I think it's the sensitivity and the focus on it as a whole. And then you can figure out, and working with your colleagues, and how it aligns with your business strategies and your outcomes on how it can be implemented within your organization.
Yeah, and just listening to you, it comes to mind that some of this customization, right? It's very personal to each organization, can also serve as a differentiator, right, into the market. It helps you show that you're different, right, and you think about things in a different way than your competitors do. No.
Yep, absolutely, and and all of it is grounded in public policy. I mean, public policy touches everything that we do. And there's many important public policy dialogues occurring in capitals all around the world, and it's impossible to play in all of them. And really, you want to be in the ones that are most helpful for your organization and its impact in society, and society's impact on your organization.
Yeah. So we have another question here. This is sort of a two-part question, I think. There's a question that says, how important are ESGs for lobbying as compared to political activity and philanthropy? Within this question, the person asks, some political sectors are closer to some of these issues than others, and how do you pick and choose, or should you pick and choose sort of your battles here and your stance?
Yeah, it's going to go back to that materiality assessment of how does it, where are the issues that your organization has determined you want to lean in on, either because of high risk or high reward, or unique risk or unique reward. And there's always still going to be other topics that, as government affairs professionals, we need to go work on. But if you can be part of your organization's larger effort in these areas, because as a strategy, your organization has said these are the areas where we're going to lean in on because it's of high priority to us, then you are contributing to your company's overall success, is the way I would look at it. It's all about prioritization of time and resources, and I call it time, voice, and talent.
Now, this may be a little basic, but I think sometimes we tend to go in so deep that we forget sort of the more basic structures of how to implement some of this stuff. So who are the stakeholders on ESG, right? You have a variety, I imagine. So you want to tell us a little bit about how you navigate the different stakeholders?
Yeah, absolutely. Categorically, I would identify investors, employees, and job applicants, I would consider customers, if you're a B2B, consumers, if you're a B2C, suppliers. I would look at both your direct suppliers and also your indirect suppliers, those that supply your suppliers. Also community partners in your sites, communities around the world. This one's going to be pretty general, but environment at large and society at large. And then once you kind of get into those categories, then when when you understand your materiality assessment and the plans that your company wants to, once you do your materiality assessment, most companies then will set some type of a visionary statement or a goal for itself that it is striving toward. And then just like we would do in all efforts, and then what's the plans, what's the investments, and then at that point you can go down deeper and think through, okay, well, in this category, this is who we really want to go touch to and touch why we want to touch them. That's not particularly unique, but again, across those categories, as you think about it and contribute to conversations and planning within your organizations, I definitely would keep all of those categories in mind.
Yeah, that's great, and it makes sense. At the end of the day, it's it's your reputation with society, right? So you want to engage with all the players, right? And you want your image to be protected, right? And to show yourself as the contributions that you make, right? Last question. So you mentioned working with other teams, right? Internally, and I mentioned at the beginning, that ESGs have been for some time sort of separate from the government affairs work. Who might government affairs work with, right? I imagine within large organizations you have, from an spectrum from PR to, right, you have a large spectrum of individuals you gotta sort of interact with. So you want to tell us a little bit how you've managed that side?
Absolutely. Yeah, you raise a good point. Certainly, I said it early on, which is, learn who your corporate responsibility, your sustainability team is. That probably would be the first one I would go talk to if you're not already in contact with them. Certainly global operations, logistics, supply chain, human resources, your EHS team, environmental health safety, and your facilities team. Facilities can sometimes oversee like your energy use and renewables, differs company by company. Certainly investor relations, extremely important. Legal as well. Oftentimes, in addition to legal compliance and regulatory compliance, but also the legal departments often will actually be the one that oversees your specific company's ethics compliance or worldwide standards of business conduct. You can also keep in mind your community affairs, your philanthropy. If you have a foundation, your philanthropy department, certainly your business units that actually are, designing products or services and putting them out into the market, and the sales, the folks that are really often out talking about the products, and they're the ones that are dealing with RFPs and the like. The other one I would mention and flag for you, if you have a political action committee, a PAC, it also intersects with your PAC as well. Your corporate responsibility team most likely is getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questionnaires or inquiries each year from customers. It may be from rating agencies, investors, ranking agencies. Some of them will actually ask about your company's political giving and your trade associations and public policy priorities, because they look at it in terms of, are you marrying politically and public policy wise what you were saying over here in corporate responsibility. And so in that arena, you certainly would want to be in touch with the corporate responsibility team or whatever team it is in your organization that's answering those questions. So the theme of this answer is it's just about everybody. And honestly, it makes sense when you think about ESG. It's really, it's how your company who your company is, its DNA and its citizenship in the world. It's not the responsibility of any one department. It is, your whole organization as a collective.
Right. I was going to comment as you were finishing. I was thinking HR, right? Because you want everybody in your organizations to carry this, right?
Well, absolutely. And if I didn't mention that one, it was a huge oversight because, yeah, definitely it is. Your policies and your programs with your current employees, but also job applicants that may want to come work for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
so we got two last minute questions. I think we have 4 minutes left, so maybe we can get them in. So one is, can you talk more about actively engaging the external community in which you are located, especially in urban communities? Maybe in urban communities a little bit,
yeah.
massive, right, versus rural, right?
Yeah, and a lot of that is going to be, what is the program that your organization wants to be involved in, and what is it? I mean, this is the area where I kind of go to the term, and it's back from the Harvard Business Review years ago, Michael Porter, around shared values, which is, what are the values that your organization shares with its communities? And communities it can be defined in any different way. But as you go and you enter in and you explore, my advice is do a lot of listening and a lot less talking, and be authentic. Also, as you're engaging with new communities, you have to be, in my opinion, recognize, and I talked with some people a while back, which is, I also do a lot of philanthropy as well. There's a lot of great organizations that when I work with charitable organizations for the like, and they want that relationship with a new partner to be long lasting just as much as I do or the organization does. And so you really have to early on really understand, what is that organization's, wherever it might be, what are their priorities and how do they line up with your priorities, and have honest conversations about it, because they don't want to waste time and you don't want to waste their time or your time either. But finding those shared interests, and then recognize that it is okay, at any particular time they may look up and say, you're not the right partner for us, or you may look up and say, right now is not the right time for us to be engaging in this. And I sit on a couple of nonprofit boards, and I would rather hear that from a large potential partner than to spend a lot of limited time. And so, that's how I would go and, engage in new communities wherever they may be.
Last question we can squeeze in. What roles can trade associations play for members interested in corporate social responsibility? Is that, associations are not a corporation, but they certainly interact and represent many of them, right?
Absolutely. And that's a great question, because this is one area where you can find a lot of common interests with not only your customers, but also your competitors. And, many of us in a very competitive industries have conversations about, there's a time and place for, and I'm talking about philanthropy here. There's, other aspects of ESG, but I'm talking about philanthropy and the role of trade associations, for example, here, but I'll cover it a little bit broader too. But, there is a role where trade associations can pull together, its members to think through. We have a unique set of impact. If we can pull ourselves together, this is where we can go and work with in a particular area, and pulling together. Most trade associations, if they have the bandwidth, see that as a value that they give their members, but also, again, it's what we just talked about here today. How do you open up more doors through policymakers and show more relevance with policymakers through ESG? And so trade associations, I have found, if they have the bandwidth, are willing to do that. And it's beyond just the philanthropy, but it's also certainly in the areas of public policy as well. My suggestion is, to have that conversation with trade associations. If some of their employees have not really worked within a company, they may not have some of the understandings and the nuances that you're dealing with, and how you and your company are looking at ESG.
Great. Yeah, it's a great opportunity for alliance building as well under certain topics and concerns that a particular industry may be affected by,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I want to thank you, Susan, for your time, for your insights. This has been a great conversation. I hope that everybody that logged in, that came in, enjoys it. Everybody will get access to this recording by tomorrow. Will be uploaded. So if you missed it or you want to review it, you're welcome to come and watch on demand. So for now, I want to thank you, Susan, once more for your time and your insights. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and see you next week on another webinar. Take care, everyone.
Have a good afternoon, everyone.